But we noticed that, at least yesterday, the first trading day of the week, we noticed that market sentiment actually reversed from the bearish trend that we saw on Friday and closed bullish. So does that mean that they're beginning to accept what's already out there?
The markets are cyclical. It's not every time that you expect markets to ride on crests. Particularly when there is speculators in the market who may want to take advantage of certain trends at any point in time. So it's like crest and trough until a pattern is established over time when the perspective becomes very clear. Right now I can tell you that perspective is not very clear because things are still evolving. And our prayer is that things don't get worse more than they are right now.
Well, let's look at another factor that investors, both locally and internationally, are also concerned about, and that's the how all of this affects the autonomy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Is this something to be worried about?
Oh, sure, yes. The autonomy of the central bank, is sacrosanct. The greatest mistake, the government will make is to try to emasculate the central bank or to try to micromanage the central bank through the appointment of governors of their choice. Worldwide, the trend is towards CBI, central bank independence. International organizations, International Monetary Funds, World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, they are all strong regarding CBI, central bank independence. And they have reasons for that. There is intrinsic value that is derived from that, basically. And then you find out that there is a negative correlation between CBI and inflation rates. As they say, CBI ceteris paribus, yields low inflation rates. Central bank independence, all things being equal, yields low inflation rates. And that's the reason Sanusi was able to arrive at the kind of inflation level that he arrived at, which is a great plus to the Nigerian economy. Like I said earlier, if you're not technically deep into these things, you may not understand where he's coming from. Now, when I begin to talk about Sanusi, I want to segregate, his professional expertise and his human relations. They are two different things. If we have to talk about that, I could give you an in-depth analysis about that. But professionally, on a scale of 1 to 100, I score him 95. Yes.
Now, Mr. Abe, still looking at this, what are the likely implications of a central bank without an autonomy? What likely implication would it have on, specifically the money market?
I'm not too sure that we can go back to a regime of a central bank that is not independent. I'm not too sure we can go back totally to that regime. He has said it, given the trend, globally, you have central bank autonomy. However, the truth is that every autonomy, the kind of autonomy we are looking at may have to do more, with instrument autonomy and possibly legal autonomy. Operationally, you will still have a kind of influence, by the National Assembly, for instance, and the executive, in terms of how certain things go on in the central bank, especially in terms of appropriation. But I'm pretty sure. Like he said, you cannot separate the individual, from the office and the direction, that of success of any organization. So if, like he said, he scored, they scored him 95%. If I will possibly look at relative market stability as far as I'm concerned, and for me, it's been a success. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry,
given some of the things that we see, over the years, like you talked about inflation. Inflation is at about 13-month, hovering around 8%.
That's right.
I mean, it talks about, and you ask yourself, take a look at the monetary policy environment and take a look at the relative stability that we have in terms of exchange rate. Exchange rate, I want to see naira one to a dollar, for instance, 1-1. But we know that is not quite possible. But what is most important for me is that you have an environment that you can plan at least relatively on a medium-term basis and take a position, on your currency. And that is succeeded as well. And of course, if you take a look at one of the major complaints, from the manufacturing, real sector of the economy is that, there hadn't been adequate lending to support that sector. That is true, but unfortunately, there's no way you can balance all the equation, and then you have relatively low interest rates, you have a low inflation, and then you have growth all at the same time. So I think things have to simply give.
Okay.
But as far as monetary policy environment is concerned, it's been a great success.
Mr. Mobo, you want to add something?
Yes, sorry, please. Let me speak further on central bank independence. And if you don't mind, I would like to make a special appeal to the government in that area, because government intervention on central banks, usually results, to very devastating effect on the economy. And I want to say that, the independence of the central bank is four-dimensional. And it's only in one aspect that the federal government, has limited influence. There's the legal independence, which is enshrined in the law. There is the goal independence. There is the operational independence, and there is the management independence. It is in the legal independence that the federal government comes in a little bit. And I want to make a distinction here. I said the federal government, which consists now in this case, the executive and the legislature, is not the exclusive preserve of the executive. Take it like this: the executive nominates, the legislature ratifies. It's a joint business. So we don't say that executive has influence. We say government has influence, but that influence is limited. In three other types of independence, there are no go areas for the government, particularly the management independence.
Okay. Now, Mr. Wobo, how does this now affect the incoming CBN governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele? How does this, because it seems like, so many issues, controversies surrounding his probable ascension to the post of CBN governor. How is this going to affect how he's going to work, especially since he's not been much of a talker? We've not really heard him speak about economic policies and the rest of it. So we don't even know. Most investors don't even know what it is that we're going to be expecting for such a man of such pedigree.
Yeah, it's important that he begins to communicate. It's very important. And then how he will perform will depend on the level of autonomy that he's allowed to exercise. Anything to the contrary is going to produce adverse effects. You see, one of the indicators that is used to know the level of control of CBN governors is the turnover rate. Alan Greenspan, I keep going back because I heard a lot of people talk about Alan Greenspan as a model. Yes, he is. His tenure was for almost 18 and a half years. 18 and a half years. So, Emefiele, if he's given a free hand to run the central bank, that would be a very, very great thing for the economy will benefit from it. And then it's important that he also begins to let his views be known so that we know the direction where he's going.
Okay, just before we quickly wrap up this conversation, we know that this year Nigeria is going to be playing host to West Africa, and of course we have a lot of investors coming in, and with this piece of news now, money markets, the capital markets, everybody seems to be reacting negatively to it. How do we expect that, somehow or the other this would tide over and not to begin to affect those investors who are coming in at that time who would want to also do business here in Nigeria?
You see, investment in Nigeria, foreign investment that is being taken by the bold and the daring. So it doesn't matter what the circumstance is, it's going to have limited effect on that category of investors. Take the Chinese, for instance. Americans will give a report to the contrary. Chinese will come in head on. They are bold and daring. So yes, they will take it with a pinch of salt, but they know that this country is a gold mine. So with that boldness, they will dare.
Okay. Mr. Abe, do you share the same sentiment? Are we going to see such influx into the money market as well?
It's going to be a reflection of what happens ultimately, like he said, the way this whole process is managed, and then the possible outcome is very important. Yesterday I was listening to the president, and then there were a number of things. So it's important that to see how this whole process of suspension and then how it ends. If it is positive and it's not seen as punitive, then it could produce a kind of positive development. Because we already know that the government is on suspension, will exit by June. We already know that, and that somebody else, and it is equally important that the names of those who will take over as deputy governor and then the new governor has been announced, so that we can take a position based on our readings of those kind of people.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts with us this morning on the program. It's been an interesting conversation. Well, I've been speaking with Wale Abe, the Executive Secretary, Financial Markets Dealers Association, and there's Chartered Stockbroker, Financial Analyst Arize Umubo, and we've been looking at the implications of the suspension of CBN Governor Sanusi on the capital, on the money market. We'll take a quick break now and come back to finish the program.